The lights inside Family Worship Center had dimmed to a soft glow that Sunday morning. Thousands of voices had just finished singing There Is a River, and the choir's final notes still echoed like whispers of heaven across the sanctuary. But in that moment, it wasn't Jimmy Swaggart's voice, nor Donnie Swaggart's fiery preaching, that captured the audience. It was Jill Swaggart, the quiet yet powerful worship leader whose presence had always felt more like a gentle flame than a roaring fire. And that morning, with tears streaming down her face, Jill stepped forward and began to speak words that would leave the entire church trembling. For years, Jill had stood faithfully by the side of Gabriel Swaggart, singing, smiling, and ministering through worship. To many, she was the perfect pastor's wife, polished, graceful, and strong. But few realized the deep battles she had been fighting in silence. That morning, in front of thousands inside the sanctuary and millions watching worldwide on Sun Life Broadcasting Network, she broke her silence with a testimony so raw that it shook the very foundation of the ministry. The woman behind the voice. To understand why Jill's confession sent shockwaves, you first have to know who she really is. Born and raised in a world far from the spotlight, Jill never imagined that one day she'd marry into the Swaggart family, a dynasty that carried both immense respect and unshakable controversy. When she married Gabriel, the grandson of Jimmy Swaggart, she stepped into not just a marriage but a legacy. Suddenly, Jill was no longer just Jill. She was Jill Swaggart, a name that carried expectations. Every note she sang, every prayer she prayed, every time she stood at the pulpit, people were watching. She was expected to be flawless, strong, and unwavering in faith. But behind closed doors, Jill was human, struggling with fears, doubts, and personal battles that few would ever imagine. The breaking point. For years, Jill had carried the weight of silence. She smiled on stage, but off stage, she fought nights of tears. According to those close to her, Jill had been wrestling with intense spiritual pressure and personal struggles, including moments of deep insecurity. Sources inside Family Worship Center whispered that she often felt overshadowed, not just by Frances Swaggart, the iron matriarch of the family, but also by the massive legacy of Jimmy himself. How could Jill, a soft-spoken worship leader, ever live up to the shadow of a dynasty that had defined Pentecostalism for decades? The breaking point came quietly. It wasn't scandal, it wasn't public failure, it was Jill's own heart, crushed under years of carrying a burden no one knew she bore. And so, one Sunday morning, when the choir stepped down and the Spirit of God seemed to hover in the air, Jill couldn't hold it back anymore. "I can't pretend anymore." She stepped up to the microphone, her voice trembling. Her hands shook as she clutched the podium. With tears rolling down her cheeks, Jill whispered the words that would soon spread across social media like wildfire. "I can't pretend anymore. I've been broken, I've been afraid, and I've been silent when God was telling me to speak." The room went still. Her voice cracked as she continued. "For years I have led you in worship, but I have hidden my own pain. I told myself I had to be strong, I had to be perfect. But the truth is, I have battled doubt. I have battled fear, and I have begged God in the middle of the night, why me? Why here? Why now?" The sanctuary filled with the sound of muffled cries. People couldn't believe what they were hearing. Jill, the woman who always seemed unshakable, was confessing weakness, the secret she had carried. Then came the part no one expected. With her voice breaking, Jill confessed the secret she had carried for years. "I almost walked away. Not just from ministry, but from God himself." Gasps filled the church. People looked at one another in shock. Could it be true? Jill Swaggart, married to Gabriel, a worship leader in one of the most influential churches in America, had almost abandoned her faith. Tears flowed freely as Jill explained. "There were nights I wanted to give up. Nights I didn't believe I was enough. Nights I thought the enemy had won. And I never told you, because I thought you needed me to be strong. But the truth is, I needed him to be strong for me." This was the heart-shaking testimony that no one saw coming. Jill wasn't confessing a scandal. She wasn't exposing sin. She was exposing something far more powerful: her humanity. The congregation reacts. Inside the Family Worship Center, thousands were on their feet, some in tears, some in awe, hands lifted toward heaven as Jill's vulnerability became a wave of freedom for others. For years, members of the congregation had admired the Swaggart family, often seeing them as untouchable. But in that moment, Jill showed them that even those in ministry faced the darkest valleys. Social media lit up instantly. "Did you hear Jill Swaggart's testimony? I'm still in tears. For the first time I feel like I can relate to her. She's real." This is the most powerful moment I've seen at Family Worship Center in years. What Jill had said in just a few minutes ignited a firestorm of reaction, not only inside the church but around the world. Why this testimony shook the church? So why did Jill's testimony shake the church so deeply? Because in a world where pastors' families are expected to be flawless, Jill dared to admit she wasn't. She shattered the illusion of perfection and showed that even the most anointed leaders fight battles in silence. Her words became a mirror to thousands watching. If Jill can be honest about her pain, maybe I can too. This was more than a testimony. It was a movement. Behind the tears, what was really happening? But here's where the story deepens. Some church insiders claim that Jill's emotional breakdown wasn't just spontaneous. It had been building for months. Rumors circulated that behind closed doors, tensions within the Swaggart family had reached a boiling point. Some whispered that Jill felt pressured by Frances Swaggart's dominant leadership style. Others suggested that Gabriel, while deeply devoted to his wife, sometimes failed to see how heavy the ministry's expectations were on her. Whatever the truth, one thing was clear. Jill's confession wasn't just personal. It was a glimpse into the cracks forming inside the walls of a ministry that had always seemed larger than life. By the end of that service, Jill had not only confessed her struggles, but also pointed to the hope that had kept her alive. I stand here today not because I am strong, but because Jesus is. And if he can carry me, he can carry you too. The congregation erupted in worship. People rushed to the altar, falling to their knees in repentance and renewal. Jill's tears had sparked revival. But outside the church, questions began to swirl. Was Jill hinting at deeper family struggles? What did she mean by almost walking away? And why now, after years of silence, did she finally confess? This was only the beginning. Because Jill Swaggart's secret testimony had opened a door that could never be closed again. The sanctuary was still buzzing days after Jill Swaggart's shocking confession. People were replaying the live stream, sharing clips on social media, and flooding the ministry with messages. Never in the history of Family Worship Center had such a raw, emotional testimony come from someone so close to the Swaggart name. But if the congregation was stunned, imagine the shockwaves inside the Swaggart family itself. Frances Swaggart, the matriarch's response. Frances Swaggart had spent decades standing beside Jimmy, guarding his reputation, his pulpit, and his empire. She was known for her iron will and sharp tongue, never afraid to defend the ministry. So, when Jill, her granddaughter-in-law, stood before thousands and confessed she had nearly walked away from God, Frances's reaction was complicated. Some insiders whispered that Frances was furious. She believes family matters stay private, one longtime staff member revealed. For Frances, Jill broke the unspoken rule, never show weakness in public. But others said that Frances, despite her tough exterior, was moved to tears when Jill spoke. After all, Frances knew better than anyone how heavy the burden of ministry could be. She had lived through Jimmy's scandals, the near collapse of their empire, and the long road of rebuilding. Perhaps, deep down, Frances saw herself in Jill's trembling words. Donnie Swaggart, the protective uncle. Donnie, always fiery from the pulpit, was caught off guard. While preaching that evening, he carefully addressed Jill's testimony without naming her directly. There are times when the devil whispers lies in your ear, Donnie thundered. Times when even the strongest among us feel weak. But that doesn't mean you've failed. It means you're human, and our God is bigger than our fear. The congregation roared in agreement. But those close to the family could hear the subtext. Donnie was defending Jill without directly confronting the fallout. Behind closed doors, however, rumors say Donnie pulled Gabriel aside. You better take care of that wife of yours, he allegedly warned. She's carrying more than you realize. Gabriel Swaggart, the husband torn in two. For Gabriel, Jill's confession cut the deepest. He stood by her side on stage, placing his arm around her as she wept, but privately, sources say he was shaken. Gabe didn't know how close she had come to walking away, one family friend whispered. He thought they were carrying the load together. Hearing her say it in front of the world, he felt blindsided. Still, Gabriel showed unwavering public support. In the next service, he addressed the church directly. I thank God for my wife's courage. Her testimony wasn't weakness, it was strength. And I stand here as her husband, grateful that she chose faith over fear. The audience erupted in applause. But inside, some wondered, was this really unity, or was Gabriel masking deeper marital struggles? The church's reaction, shockwaves, and division. The testimony had gone viral, millions of views across YouTube, TikTok, and Facebook. While many celebrated Jill's honesty, not everyone was pleased. Some longtime followers of Jimmy Swaggart Ministries whispered concerns. Why would she say that? It makes the family look weak. If Jill struggled like that, how are the rest of us supposed to have faith? This could open the door for critics to attack. Others, however, felt liberated. Finally, someone real. Jill's honesty saved me. I was about to walk away from my faith too. Her words kept me here. She showed us that even leaders battle the same demons we do. The church had never been so divided. For some, Jill was a hero. For others, she was a liability. The rumors behind closed doors. As Jill's testimony spread, whispers began to grow louder. What exactly had she meant when she said, "I almost walked away"? Not just from ministry, but from God himself. Did she mean she was struggling with faith? Or did she mean something more personal? Perhaps a battle within her marriage, or even her place in the Swaggart dynasty. Some speculated that Jill's emotional collapse was tied to the immense expectations placed on her as the wife of Gabriel Swaggart, the heir apparent to Jimmy's empire. Being the next First Lady of JSM was not a small calling. People think Jill just sings a few songs, one insider explained. But the pressure on her is enormous. She's expected to be perfect, to never stumble, to always look and act the part. After years of that, something had to break. A shocking whisper. Was it about Gabriel? Then came the most controversial rumor, that Jill's confession may have hinted at struggles within her marriage to Gabriel. Though no concrete evidence has ever emerged, whispers spread like wildfire. Some claim Jill felt neglected as Gabriel poured his life into ministry. Others believed her tears masked deeper struggles in their home. A few even dared to ask, did Jill nearly walk away, not just from God, but from Gabriel too? The speculation was explosive, though unconfirmed. Still, the timing of Jill's testimony left many wondering, was this simply a spiritual confession, or was there more beneath the surface? Frances steps in. According to sources, Frances quickly called a private family meeting after Jill's testimony. One staff member described it as tense and emotional. She told Jill she admired her honesty, the source revealed, but she also warned her that every word she speaks reflects on the ministry. Frances reminded everyone, the Swaggart name must always remain strong. Jill, however, stood her ground. She told the family that hiding her pain any longer would have destroyed her completely. It was the clash of two philosophies. Frances believed in protecting the image. Jill believed in protecting her soul. The revival that followed. Despite the controversy, one thing was undeniable. Jill's testimony sparked revival. In the weeks that followed, prayer meetings were packed. Calls flooded the ministry's prayer line. People who had walked away from church began returning, saying Jill's vulnerability gave them hope. Even critics admitted, something powerful had been unleashed. One pastor visiting from out of state said, "I've followed Jimmy Swaggart Ministries for 30 years. But what Jill did that morning was the most real, most anointed thing I've ever witnessed here. The beginning of a storm." But with every revival comes resistance. As Jill's testimony spread, enemies of the Swaggart Ministry pounced. Old scandals were dredged up. Critics mocked the family. Tabloid-style blogs claimed Jill's tears were a sign of deeper dysfunction in the Swaggart household. Inside the ministry, the tension grew. Would Jill's honesty be remembered as a turning point toward revival? Or would it ignite a storm that could tear the family apart? One thing was certain, Jill's words could not be taken back. The door was open, and what lay behind it was about to